Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the podcast. I'm Sarah, and as always, I'm not alone here. Alex is with me today.
Hi, everyone. I'm really glad to be here. And I have to say, Sarah, today's word feels heavy, but in a good way.
It really does. Today's word is meaning, and the reason we chose it is simple. Almost every difficult experience people go through eventually leads to this question: what does this mean? Or even more quietly, does any of this mean anything at all?
What's interesting is that meaning is a word everyone uses, but very few people ever stop to define. We talk about meaningful work, meaningful relationships, meaningful conversations. But when you ask someone what meaning actually is, the answer isn't clear. It's not something you can point to. You can't measure it. You can't hold it. And yet, the absence of meaning can feel unbearable.
Exactly. Meaning isn't the same as happiness. Someone can be happy for a moment without feeling that their life has meaning. And someone can feel deeply challenged, even exhausted, and still feel that what they're doing matters. That's an important distinction, especially for English learners, because these words are often confused. Meaning is not about comfort. It's about significance.
At its core, meaning refers to the sense that something matters beyond the moment. It's the feeling that your actions, experiences, or struggles are connected to something larger than immediate pleasure or survival. When people say, "This gives my life meaning," they're usually talking about connection to values, to people, to purpose, or to contribution.
And that's why losing meaning is often more painful than losing motivation. Motivation can return after rest. Energy can return after recovery. But when meaning disappears, people feel lost. They keep moving, working, studying, socializing. But internally, something feels empty, like effort without direction.
In psychology and philosophy, meaning is often described as a structure that helps people tolerate difficulty. When life is hard but meaningful, people endure. When life is easy but meaningless, people still feel dissatisfied. This is why people sometimes feel burnout even when everything looks fine from the outside.
Yes, and this shows up clearly in language. In English, people don't usually say, "I'm tired of working." They say, "I don't see the point anymore," or "This doesn't feel meaningful." Those sentences reveal something deeper than fatigue. They reveal a loss of connection between effort and purpose.
Another important aspect of meaning is that it's personal. What feels meaningful to one person may feel empty to another. For some, meaning comes from family. For others, from creativity, service, learning, faith, or impact. English reflects this individuality through phrases like finding meaning, creating meaning, or searching for meaning. Notice how meaning is not something we receive automatically, it's something we actively engage with.
And that's powerful, because it means meaning is not only discovered, it's also built. People often wait for meaning to appear, as if it's a reward. But meaning grows through choices, what you commit to, what you care about, and what you continue doing even when no one is watching.
This also explains why periods of transition are so uncomfortable. When someone changes countries, careers, relationships, or identities, meaning becomes unstable. The old structure no longer fits, but the new one hasn't formed yet. That in-between space feels confusing, even frightening, because meaning hasn't caught up with experience.
And instead of asking, "What should I do next?" people often ask, Who am I now? That question is deeply connected to meaning, because meaning doesn't just guide action, it shapes identity.
So when we talk about meaning, we're not talking about one answer. We're talking about a process, a relationship between your values and your reality, between what matters to you and how you live. And understanding this word in English helps you express some of the most complex thoughts a human being can have.
When people lose meaning, it rarely arrives as a dramatic collapse. There is no single moment where everything falls apart or where life suddenly feels empty. Instead, it fades slowly, almost invisibly. Meaning erodes through days that look productive on the surface, but feel hollow underneath. Life keeps moving forward, but the inner connection to it weakens. People continue to function, often very well, while something essential inside them quietly disconnects. One of the main ways meaning disappears is through repetition without reflection. Routines that once served a purpose become automatic, and over time, people stop questioning them. They wake up, follow the same schedule, complete the same tasks, and go to sleep, not because they believe in what they're doing, but because it's what comes next. What once felt intentional turns mechanical. Without moments of reflection, routines stop being pathways toward something and start feeling like cycles that go nowhere. Another factor is living on inherited expectations. Many people pursue paths that once made sense, chosen by family, culture, or earlier versions of themselves, but never pause to ask whether those paths still align with who they are now. At first, this misalignment is tolerable. Over time, it creates an internal tension. People feel successful on paper, but strangely absent from their own lives. The goals are being met, but they no longer feel personally meaningful, and the emotional reward disappears. Meaning also fades when effort is no longer connected to impact. When people give their time, energy, and attention, but don't see how it contributes to anything larger. Growth, connection, change, or purpose, motivation weakens. Work becomes about endurance rather than contribution. Studying becomes about completion rather than understanding. Even relationships can feel transactional instead of nourishing. Without a sense that one's actions matter beyond survival, life begins to feel like maintenance rather than movement. There is also the quiet loss that comes from postponing oneself. Many people delay their values, dreams, and curiosities for later, believing that meaning will return once things settle down. But later often keeps moving. Over time, people adapt so well to postponement that they forget what they were postponing in the first place. Meaning doesn't disappear because it was destroyed. It disappears because it was never given space to exist. Eventually, the question why stops appearing. Not because it was answered, but because asking it feels exhausting. When no clear answer emerges, people learn to stop asking. Life becomes about getting through the day rather than understanding it. And while this state doesn't always feel painful, it feels heavy, muted, and distant, like living slightly outside of one's own experience. Losing meaning, then, is not a failure or a personal weakness. It is often a sign of long-term disconnection between action and intention, between effort and inner values. And because it happens quietly, it often goes unnoticed for a long time. But recognizing this slow fading is important, because meaning rarely returns through big changes alone. It begins with small moments of reflection, honest questioning, and the willingness to reconnect daily actions with personal purpose.
And what makes this especially difficult is that, from the outside, everything can appear fine, sometimes even impressive. The responsibilities are being met, the milestones are being checked off. To others, it may look like stability, discipline, or success. This is precisely why the loss of meaning is so hard to name. both to oneself and to others. There is no single problem to point to, no clear crisis that explains the unease. Everything that is supposed to feel fulfilling is technically in place, yet something essential is missing. Inside effort begins to feel strangely detached from value. Energy is being spent every day, but it no longer translates into a sense of significance. Tasks are completed, but they don't leave behind a feeling of contribution or growth. Instead of satisfaction, there is only relief that something is finished. Over time, even that relief fades, replaced by a dull sense of obligation. The work continues, but the emotional reward that once justified the effort no longer arrives. This internal disconnection creates a quiet confusion. People start questioning themselves rather than their circumstances. They wonder why they feel unmotivated when nothing is wrong, why they feel empty despite doing everything expected of them. Because there is no visible breakdown, they often assume the problem must be a personal flaw, a lack of gratitude, ambition, or resilience. This self-blame deepens the disconnection, making it even harder to articulate what's missing. The absence of meaning is also isolating because it's invisible. Others may celebrate achievements that feel emotionally flat. Compliments can feel misplaced, even uncomfortable, because they affirm a version of life that no longer feels true. There's a growing gap between external validation and internal experience, and living in that gap requires constant emotional adjustment. Over time, this mismatch can drain a person more than obvious hardship. When effort feels disconnected from value, even rest doesn't fully restore energy. The exhaustion isn't physical, it's existential. You're tired not because you're doing too much, but because what you're doing no longer feels anchored to anything that matters to you. And until that disconnection is acknowledged, the sense of meaning continues to quietly slip further away.
In English, this is often expressed through phrases like going through the motions or feeling empty. These phrases are important because they don't describe sadness, they describe absence. Absence of purpose, absence of direction, absence of emotional reward. People aren't always unhappy when they lose meaning. They're often numb.
Yes, and numbness is frequently misunderstood. It's not a lack of emotion, it's a protective response to long-term dissatisfaction. When effort doesn't lead to meaning, the mind reduces emotional engagement. This is why people say things like, "I don't care anymore," even when they actually do. Caring without meaning becomes exhausting.
Another reason meaning disappears is misalignment. When someone's values don't match how they're living, the internal tension slowly erodes purpose. For example, someone might value creativity, but spend years in a role that discourages it, or value connection while living a life built around isolation and productivity. Over time, the gap between values and reality creates emotional friction.
And that friction doesn't always show up as anger. Often it shows up as restlessness, a constant feeling that something is missing, even when everything seems stable. In English, people describe this with phrases like, "I feel stuck," or "something feels off." Those expressions signal a loss of meaning, not a lack of opportunity.
It's also important to talk about how meaning is affected by external expectations. Many people inherit ideas of what a meaningful life should look like: success, status, productivity, approval. They chase those goals sincerely, and when they reach them and still feel empty, the confusion can be overwhelming.
Because then the question becomes uncomfortable. If I did everything right and still feel unfulfilled, what went wrong? And often the answer is not failure, it's imitation. Borrowed meaning doesn't sustain you. Meaning that isn't chosen eventually collapses.
This is why meaning can't be outsourced. You can be praised, rewarded, promoted, or admired, but none of those things create meaning on their own. They can support it, but they can't replace it. Meaning requires personal engagement. It requires ownership.
And ownership can be scary because it means admitting that no one else is responsible for making your life feel significant. That realization can feel heavy, especially for people who have spent years meeting expectations rather than listening inward.
Another way meaning fades is through unresolved loss. When grief, disappointment, or disillusionment isn't processed, it interrupts the ability to attach significance to new experiences. People move forward physically, but emotionally, something remains unfinished.
That's when meaning feels fragile. New goals don't inspire the same way. Achievements feel muted, and instead of excitement, there's hesitation. The language people use here is very telling. What's the point? Or it doesn't matter anyway.
What's crucial to understand is that losing meaning doesn't mean something is wrong with you. It often means you've outgrown an old structure. Meaning isn't lost forever. It's suspended while something new is forming.
And that suspension period is uncomfortable but necessary. It's the space where reflection replaces autopilot, where questions replace answers, and where meaning eventually begins to reorganize itself around who you are now, not who you used to be.
So take a moment after this episode. Check in with yourself. Notice what feels heavy. Notice what feels empty. Awareness is not the end. It's the beginning.
Thank you for spending this time with us. We're glad you're here, learning slowly, thoughtfully, and honestly.
Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe our channel.